Hi there, I'm Loida Velasquez, a Realtor.com first-time home buying expert and agent with Team BC at eXp Realty. In today's video, I will be sharing with you everything from getting your offer accepted, closing costs, inspections, contingencies, and the final walkthrough. So if you're a first-time buyer and you're going through this process, you'll definitely want to stay tuned to the end. There is no better feeling than when you finally get an offer accepted. Now, what happens next? There are a lot of moving pieces in a real estate transaction that you might feel overwhelmed sometimes, but don't worry, it is completely normal. Everyone goes through this. After all, this is the purchase of one of your largest investments. So what does the process look like? Once there is an accepted offer, the listing agent will open escrow, which is typically 30 to 45 days. In those first few days, you as a buyer will also submit your earnest money deposit. The EMD, which is referenced to all the time, is just a deposit that is sent for the purchase offer that you have submitted in good faith. So pretty much all it means is that you're telling the seller, hey, I'm really serious about wanting your home and here's a deposit so that you can see that. So once you have submitted the deposit, the next step will be for you and your agent to arrange inspections and do all of your due diligence. During this time period is when you send a home inspector out to see the home. That way they can see if there's anything wrong that's going on with the house. If you want to get a roof inspector, you can also schedule that. Pretty much any type of inspection that you want to get, this is the time to do so. During this beginning time frame as well is also when the lender is going to schedule for the appraiser to go out. The appraiser is the person who determines the value of your home based on what comparable homes are selling for, and they'll be able to determine that value to be able to give you that loan. And then that's pretty much what that process looks like in the beginning. As your lender is making all of these arrangements, they are going to be in constant communication with you. So please always be sure to be checking your email and checking your phone for any phone calls or messages, because there's so many deadlines and timeframes that have to be met in a real estate transaction. And the last thing that we want to do is fall behind. So I just told you about the home inspection, and I want to share with you a little bit more as to why doing this is extremely important. Now, a home inspection is actually not mandatory, but I personally tell all of my clients to get them. Now, the reason that you want to do this is because sometimes you will see homes that look beautiful. The pictures are beautiful. The outside looks beautiful. They have done an amazing job remodeling or doing whatever it is. But once you do a home inspection, you'll be able to see if there are any red flags or anything that's going on beyond the walls and the colors. I'll give you an example. So last year I was working with a buyer. We were house shopping. He found a house. We submitted an offer. The offer got accepted. Now, the house looked like it was in great condition. It was in a great area. He absolutely loved everything about it. I told him, you know what? It's important that we get a home inspection. So the home inspector went out, and long story short, the home inspection report, which is usually maybe 30 or 40 pages, more or less, to give you an idea, it came back and there were so many issues with that house. The house had foundation issues. The house had mold. It had so much damage and things that needed to be repaired that it got to the point that I had to talk to the listing agent and let him know exactly what was going on. Now, at that point, my buyer did not want to do any of the repairs, and we were not able to negotiate with the seller because the seller did not want to reduce the price or give a credit. And when that happened, we unfortunately had to cancel. But that's why you want to get a home inspection. So remember when I told you about the appraiser going out to determine the value of your home and all of that earlier a couple minutes ago? Okay, cool. So the reason that we really care about what the appraiser values the home at is because it might make or break the deal. So I'll give you an example. Let's say that you submit an offer for $300,000. Let's say that the appraiser goes out and he sees that comparable homes have sold for $280,000. Now we're talking about a $20,000 difference. This $20,000 difference has to be negotiated. So let's say your appraisal came in below the purchase price. At that point, your agent has to negotiate with the listing agent to see what's going to happen to that difference. Now, some of the outcomes might be that the seller reduces the price to the appraisal value. Another option might be that they tell you, you know what, we'll meet you halfway. And the other option might be that they will ask for you, the buyer, to pay the difference. Now, if for some reason you guys cannot negotiate on one of the outcomes or something to happen, then at that point, you as a buyer can walk away and cancel the contract. You are not obligated to continue because obviously the bank is only going to loan you for what the home appraised for and nothing else. If you don't have additional money to pay out of pocket, it's going to be very difficult for you to continue. And if the seller is being stubborn, which it happens all the time, they might just say, you know what, if you really want it, you'll pay the difference. And if not, we're okay with you walking away. And that is just the reality. So now let's talk about contingencies. What does that even mean? So a contingency is pretty much an action that needs to be taken in order for a contract to be binding. So in a real estate transaction, there are 3 different types of contingencies that we want to be on the lookout for. So we have the appraisal contingency, we have the loan contingency, and we have the inspection contingency. The inspection contingency is a time frame where you do all of your due diligence. If you remember, I talked about the inspections and having a roofer, someone from foundation, any type of inspector to come out. This is that time frame. Depending on where you're at or what your agent negotiates, the contingency period might be 10 days or it might be 17 days or it might be more or less than that. So as we continue, let's talk about the appraisal contingency. This is the time frame that you have in order for the appraiser to go out and do the evaluation of the home. And then lastly, we have the loan contingency. That period is pretty much when your lender goes through all of the paperwork, gives it to the bank, and you get the loan approval. The loan contingency is pretty much the time frame from when your lender starts to work on the file up to the point that the bank is ready to close and give the loan to you. That is just pretty much the summary of it. You guys can go on Realtor.com tips for buyers section to get a lot more information on the details of a transaction and contingencies. Now, one thing I do want to note is that during the time frame of the contingency period, if something does come up as a red flag and you decide that you no longer want to continue, you can absolutely cancel and be given your deposit back. A very popular question that I get from first-time buyers is, Loida, if I submit a deposit and I end up canceling or backing out, do I lose my money or do I get it back, or how does that even work? So if you're within the contingency period and you cancel, you get it back. Let's say you have removed all of your contingencies and you are past all of those deadlines. Should you decide to cancel, then at that point, the seller can take your deposit if they want. Or if they're nice, maybe they'll give it to you or maybe they'll give you half. But that is typically the rules of real estate and how the contingency periods work along with your deposit. While there are so many moving parts in a real estate transaction, something that a lot of first-time buyers usually oversee is the reality of closing costs. Closing costs is usually 2 to 3% of the purchase price, and these are fees that are on top of the down payment. So when you're talking to a lender or when you are initially talking to a real estate agent and you let them know that you're thinking about buying, they might ask you how much money you have saved for a down payment. So on top of the down payment, also consider an additional 2 or 3% to save up. Once you talk to a lender, obviously they'll be able to tell you exactly how much money you need for closing costs. So usually what happens both in the beginning and towards the end of a transaction is that your lender will send you what is called a loan estimate. This loan estimate will have all of the figures, including your closing costs. That way you have a better idea as to how much money you will need to come in with at the end to submit to escrow and close the deal. When it comes to closing costs, it is standard for the buyer and the seller each to pay their own fees. Sometimes you as a buyer can request for the seller to pay some of your closing costs, not all. You can request whether it's $5,000, $10,000, $3,000, whatever it is that you and your agent agree upon. You can request for the seller to pay, but it does not guarantee that they will actually grant you that. A seller at the end of the day wants to walk away with the most money in their pocket. And if they have an offer that's asking for closing costs versus an offer that is not, considering all the other terms and the price aside, they will prefer someone that is not asking for closing costs. So make sure that you talk to your lender, because they will be able to give you a complete breakdown of all of the costs and how much money you will need in order to purchase your home. As we're getting ready to wrap up the transaction, a few days before closing, we will do what is called a final walkthrough. This walkthrough pretty much is just for you to go back to the home to see it one last time, just in case anything has happened. During these walkthroughs, we're always on the lookout to make sure that the seller has done any repairs that were requested. We also want to make sure that the home is still in the same condition as when you first saw it, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the house hasn't fallen apart, nothing has been broken, windows are not missing, doors are not broken. You guys get the idea. So, worst case scenario, this can happen. And I'll share with you a quick story. So, years ago, I was working with a buyer and we had submitted an offer. In the contract, they asked for all of the appliances. So the washer, dryer, stove, fridge, everything. The seller signed off and agreed to all of our terms, including leaving all of the appliances. So come the day of the final walkthrough, the seller ended up taking the fridge. Now this became a problem because obviously we had a legally binding contract where the seller had agreed to give the buyer the fridge. And maybe to you is not a big deal, but to my buyer it was, because they had already made arrangements for appliances that they were going to buy or not buy. And now we had to worry about this fridge and figure something out. So the great thing is that I was able to communicate with the listing agent. They were able to see that the seller did in fact sign the contract where they stated that they were going to give the appliances. So the seller ended up bringing back that fridge. Obviously, this is the worst case scenario. Now, the best case scenario is that everything is still in the best condition as when you first saw it. You have checked everything out. The seller did all of the repairs that they said that they were going to do. So then at that point, you and your agent, which will be there with you on the final walkthrough, can go ahead and proceed to closing. What closing is pretty much the transfer of ownership from the seller to you. So pretty much the title changes. And that is when you become a homeowner. So I hope that you have visualized yourself as I have shared with you what the entire process looks like. I know that first-time home buyers usually tell me that they're scared initially when they're starting the process, but at the end, you'll notice that everything was absolutely worth it. If you enjoyed this video, make sure that you give it a thumbs up, share it with someone else, and of course, subscribe to this channel. We have a playlist full of videos for first-time buyers, so check that out. And also check out Realtor.com for any consumer tips for buyers as well. I'm Loida Velasquez, your Realtor.com expert, and I will see you on the next one.